knowledge of self, students, our environment, and the classroom through seeing differently, learning the language, cultural sensitivity, cultural competence, cultural proficient teaching through our instruction, and then 7 principles of culturally responsive community. So as you can see, there's a lot we'll join together on, and some things I am going to leave for Dorothy, but I'm gonna how would I say? I'm going to engage you in some of that conversation next. Okay, so let me just say this: that when we talk about the role of the teacher, which really is one who is a key essential to the education and academic community. Not the only, but key. There's the dorms, there's all of the campus culture that we'll talk about that our students engage in. So it's the role of the teacher building a culturally competent, proficient educational community. What does that involve? Four key things that's important. The most important is my knowledge of myself, the knowledge of my students, the knowledge of my environment that also teaches a lot of messages. There's a lot of hidden curriculum when we talk about the environment. What do I mean by that? Your office, your campus, the campus walls, the different departments, and all that the departments offer in the field of their discipline, where students find themselves invited in because they can look around and either see themselves or they can hear conversations that engage them that in important aspects of themselves. And then, of course, the curriculum. And we're going to really go through, and as you know, I'm on a time, and those of you that have invited me to chapel know that you got to pray me off the stage because I love talking. I tell you, if Howard Gardner would have had his 7 intelligences as study and educators would have learned it when I was growing up, I probably would have less spankings for talking too much in class. They did not realize that's my intelligence. But anyway, we're going to talk about the various learning styles. And I'm so excited, again, as I said, to be with you. One thing about not learning styles, but one thing about being an educator is this. We all bring to the classroom the reason of why we teach. And that is either I've accepted a calling, I have a framework and a foundation for which I teach or why I teach. And so that framework is what really generates a lot about me in the classroom. As an educator, each of us have personal convictions. We have a calling, even philosophical theories about why we educate, that I view is very critical to the approach that we take when it comes to being an educator. And when it comes to thinking about how am I inclusive in the way that I teach, I know that one thing I can say, I know that this is a calling, that God has blessed and given me this particular gift to represent him. But one of the things three things that I value are 3 lessons, major lessons that serves as foundational frameworks to why I teach. I start my class off, especially when I'm teaching teachers, with one of the greatest foundational principles and convictions that I have about educating. And I want you to know it came right from my favorite teacher at Life Pacific, at that time, Life Bible College, Dr. Dorothy Jean Furlong. When we were learning about education, she made a statement that I just took to heart because I knew that was some of the ways that I learned a lot of things. And that is that a teacher will teach and I'll say this to everybody in the room, whoever you are, if you're not a faculty, your staff, your administration, you will teach, or whatever you do, lead, whatever you do, first by what you say. You'll lead more by what you do. But you will teach more by who you are. And so I can say that it's so important to know that who you are as a compassionate human being who loves the Lord sends a message before you open your mouth. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, in something we're going to do. And then in my graduate studies, I had a professor and as I studied school administration, I had a professor who taught a philosophy course that said to us, you are the living curriculum. That's heavy. The living curriculum, meaning, and he tied it to what Paul said. You are living epistles read of men. So when I think about diverse students on your campus, what is your book of behaviors and attitudes and experiences and all that you bring to the class? What are they reading? What are they reading? We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then finally, the other particular statement in my doctoral studies, as we were reading some information, I came upon a statement from St. Francis of Assisi. And the theologians, you all probably know this, and if not, it's okay. But he states, spread the good news or the gospel. If necessary, use words. What are the words that your life exhibits when it comes to this concept of a culturally diverse and proficient educator? From all of those foundational components that I have taken for me as a lifestyle, as how I become incarnate to my students. They see me before and after the class we teach, but how do I see differently? Students have changed since some of us entered the education field. When I started the education field, I was in a predominantly African-American school in Inglewood. And just as God took my journey around, now mind you, I also went to Life Pacific, where I was the only African-American freshman woman in my class, coming out of Dorsey High School in the city, which we had that time. Dorsey was a little bit diverse, but I was a girl from the hood. I was in Watts during the Watts riots. So I'm having all kinds of culture shock going into this higher education institution. And that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. Okay, let's go on. Let me just say this. Okay, let's go on. You're going to see a picture, and you have a copy of this picture in your packet. It's called The Old Hag and the Young Woman. We live out our faith through teaching and embracing students who are different by seeing different. How many of you have seen this portrait before? And how many of you see both the young woman and the old woman? I know I can't see everybody. I wish I could, because I'd love to know who doesn't see one or the other. But in this portrait, and I'll say this, there's an old woman and there's a young woman. When you look at this picture, and the first time you actually had your aha moment, well, let me back up and say, I've used this with children when I've taught conflict resolution. And I've said, do you see a young woman, having them wanting to think of another's point of view, another's way of thinking. And some of these kids have said, I see an eagle, I see a rabbit, I see a bear. And I'm quick to jump on and say, wait a minute, you don't see an eagle, you don't see a bear, you don't see, and that's how we are as educators, is that my perspective is the way. The way I see is the way. I don't often think about my students bring lens and frames of references that they might see the content that I share a bit differently. So when I ask you, do you see a bear? Do you see an eagle? Do you see a rabbit? I'll tell you, I'm still looking. I think I saw an eagle with some of my own imagery, but the reality is there is a young woman, there is an old woman. Now, my other question to you is, when you saw this image, what was the image you saw first? Was it the old woman? Was it the young woman? What did you see first? Most of the time, whenever you see this image, your frame of reference of the first time you saw it and the way you saw it comes to focus first. You almost have to shift your vision to see the other one first. And maybe not, maybe you've got it, but this is important as we teach our students, that we see differently. As the role of a teacher is how is your vision and your lens working? Now, I have a certain prescription here. If I took my prescription off, my glasses off, and said, Michael Salameyer, take a look through my glasses and tell me what you see. Well, if Michael isn't nearsighted, it's going to do all kinds of things to his what he sees. Now, the question is this: because he doesn't see through my lens the way I see them and frame clarity for the way I see, does it mean my vision is off? Does it mean that my way of seeing my world is wrong? It is the role of the teacher to engage students in a way that says, not only that I might not see it the way you do, but can you help me see? And that is very important. We're going to keep moving because I can be real. One of the things about, and here's where we're going to get into some activity here. You're going to be, Abby is going to be having you go into rooms in just a moment, but I want to talk to you about this. Because one thing about seeing differently requires you to know the language for how you see. This is all about self-awareness as I'm talking to you right now. It's about you, the teacher, your role. How willing are you to see differently, to understand differently? You have diverse students from diverse backgrounds, diverse languages, diverse skill set, diverse communities. There's a whole lot that goes on in your classrooms. And you become the one who welcomes all of those into the classroom equitably. And their voice and their person are seen and heard. So why is language so important to self-awareness and to this whole culture of education? Each of you have a frame of reference when it comes to knowing yourself. Nobody knows you better than you. God knows you for sure. But nobody really knows you but you. And I tend to define the term culture synonymous to humanity. You might struggle with that, and that's okay. I'm not here to have an argument. But I will say that when I think about culture, because so oftentimes, and well, I'm going to get ahead of myself because I want you to do this. Each of you have a frame of reference when it comes to knowing yourself. I would like to take the time in your groups. I'd like for you to take the time. And don't go back, honey. My husband kind of got ahead of me. To go into your groups, and you have a document that says exploring language activity. That's what I want. I don't want you to get the books, the sets of terms and their definitions. I want you to look for the actual document called Exploring Language Activity. If you go to your terms, you're cheating. And you know how you are when your students cheat. So I am trusting you that you will use only that activity sheet, not the terms. I'm trusting you here. So the guidelines are on the sheet for what you're going to do. And you're going to only have about 15 minutes. And you may not get to everything, and that's okay, because that's going to be more work for Marcus, okay? So what's important is that you understand that there is language that comes when it comes to being a culturally proficient and sensitive educator. There's a set of words that you need to be aware of, and you probably already are aware of them, and you have your own frame of reference and definition. But for now, I am going to quickly look at the objective. It's to help each participant learn to appreciate language when discussing cultural issues, and how the process of discussing the definitions adds to the understanding of terms. There's a list of terms on this screen. There's a list of terms on your paper. Those are the only ones you're going to have in your discussion. Your packet is going to have a whole lot more. I'm not going to take the time with those. You could do that on your own. So the example would be going into your rooms, the word culture. Now there's going to be a facilitator. I haven't assigned a facilitator. So the leader in the group take over, and then you all choose one person to report out when we come back, because we'll go out for about 15 minutes. And then I'm going to kind of drop in each of your groups. But it's like this: stereotype. What would be your definition of stereotype? And I only want what you think the definition, or your perspective of the definition. When you think of the word stereotype, what does that mean? What does culture mean? So everyone would get a chance. So stereotype for me would be something somebody thinks about me that they've been told that isn't true. So they think about me that way. Or something, I don't want you to think of, okay, what's the Webster Dictionary? What is, because Mark Dusick is deep, so he's going to try to go to that deep side. I want you all to just be yourself. Now, if you feel like, I'm not sure, then that's okay. But the leader is to try and get a point and then you come to a common decision on which one you agree on. So, Abby, let's take it away. That you all got through all of them and you answered all 4 of the sections, right? Yeah, right. Thumbs up. Somebody not telling the truth. Well, I'm leaving that work for Marcus to continue. However, it is very important that you begin thinking about having conversations, that we begin to think about what's the common language around what it is we're talking about when we talk about culture proficiency, how we talk about cultural sensitivity. And as an educator, do we understand the terms or know the terms that have been researched and defined? And I picked up from several groups some of your thinking about terms, and you understand terms from your frame of reference. Now, I've given you a packet of terms. You are not going to do anything with those until after our time together. And I hope that in your departments, you will begin to start thinking about how we as an institution, how we as a department look at language that have to do with culture and its meaning. I guarantee you that there are students, you have students who understand. I'm sorry here, I'm going through the, oh, okay. Who understand a lot about this language that you might not really have clarity on. And so, I wanted to really help you look at the fact as someone who is aware of themselves. Do I understand the dialogue and the language around education and what happens in diverse settings? What if I said to you, well, let me come back and say, I need the groups to come back and give us some feedback because I'm ready to get going. Okay, so group one, who's the spokesperson? And I'm not going to tell you the term to define. Which one did you find yourselves feeling like, yeah, we have that in common, or we could work on that language? Group one, who's the representative?
I'm sorry, I don't remember our group number.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just say, why don't you go on, and then the next group I was in, I think was with Gail. That group, that'll be the next. Are you in Gail's group, right?
Yes.
And the next one will be the one with Marcus. The next one will be the one with Eric. And there may have been one more. But anyway, you will be that last group. Okay, you go first. Tell me your name.
Okay. You would like me to go first?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'm Christine.
Christine, okay.
Yes. So we only got to stereotype, and okay. I mean, we didn't get too far actually beyond that. So our group, when we were talking about culture, we had a lot of overlap in terms of people's collective experience or agreed upon beliefs in a group. And we even talked about subcultures that exist in groups. Like Gail was giving an example of like Southern culture and how that's very different. And even a sense of belonging or being. So this is kind of what we came up with when we were discussing our impressions and our experiences with culture.
Next.
We'll define microaggression as the little things you do that reveal your biases, whether you're aware or unaware. And I don't know if you want an example of that, but
no, I just because for the sake of time. But you know, it's so neat to hear that you guys went into that word, because I was sitting in one group where someone in the group said, I hadn't heard of that word before. And these are the kinds of things that happen when we talk about the role of the teacher in being culturally sensitive, culturally proficient, understanding, because, you know, it might be good. Why don't you just go in and give one example? Because within that same group, someone did give an example, which was a good one. But the fact that we're all in different places. Now, keep in mind, I am not saying any of this as a point of judgment. I am saying, folks, we see differently. And how do we as a community that wants to be and live out cultural proficiency in a Christ-like way, help each other with our lens? Why don't you give us a real quick illustration?
I can give you an illustration. I remember when I was in high school, my freshman year, I went to the counselor who was supposed to help me find what classes I should take and everything. And for no apparent reason, she assigned me to lower level classes. No AP,
Honors.
no honors, nothing. Just the lower level classes. And I
Shop and auto mechanics and all of those
right,
kinds of.
right. And I was
My
like,
sons had that experience, but he met their mother. Go on.
right. And the same. So the interesting thing, I come from a biracial family. My mother, she's white. I was adopted, so I had my mom come to the school, and when she talked to the counselor, you could see her whole countenance change. Like, oh, like maybe I should have put you in AP.
Well,
Uh,
what happened was she walked in and she said, my son is in all the lower level classes, whereas all of his grades from junior high should have put him in honors.
Mhm.
And they said, there's no way we would have done that to your son, because they were looking at her face and she was
oh,
white.
they didn't see me at the time. Yeah.
And then when she said, who's your son? And she said, Marcus Robinson, then their face changed.
Yeah. So these types of initial actions are microaggressions. But as a part of, well, I'm getting ahead of myself on this, but it's coming from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next group. We got 2 groups. We're gonna go real quick because we gotta run now. I'm looking at a clock that's not my friend right now. Next.
All right, our group only got through the first few as well.
Okay.
And I'll just give a definition of stereotype. What we had for that one was generalizations about people or groups that are often used to define every member of that group.
Good. Good.
And
who cheated and looked at the terminology in your group? Go on.
well, both.
No, that's good. No, this is good. I love it.
Both Michael and Kimo were very well versed in these definitions. So
yeah.
The rest of us
and see, you see the differences
mm-hmm.
in where you might be just in the language, just in understanding the dynamics, and language is very important in community. So and I did not expect you to get through all of them, given our time constraints, but I do want you to know how important it is to start the conversation. And when I say you, I'm talking about collectively. Because we go in and we attempt to start these strategies and when we don't even have the language. All right, the last group, is that the last group? Is it 3 groups? It's 4 groups, 1 more group, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know what our group number was, but yeah,
that's okay.
We talked about it. I had not really heard the term microaggression very much, so
Mm-hmm.
we spent a lot of time talking about that. And part of what we came up with was that it's can be a very small thing, but it generally is evidence that something else is going on beneath the surface. I threw out the pretty common iceberg metaphor, for that.
You're taking my next illustration. That's okay.
That
gives me a chance to move and catch up. That gives me a chance to move. I love it. Go on.
Okay. So, and the interesting thing about the microaggression was that the person who is on the receiving end doesn't even know sometimes that they're receiving it.
Mm-hmm.
Such as the example that we shared was if you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off and you say something about them, they're never going to hear it, but it's still indicating that there may be some sort of a process in your own mind going on that could be a problem in a face-to-face situation.
That's good. And your name is it Gary?
My name's Mark.
Mark. Okay, I'm so sorry. All right. I love this. Okay, so going to the next one. We've actually got started with talking about language. But before we go on, I want to say something and ask you this. And hold on for a minute. What is it? Not yet, babe. How would you accept the terminology of education that George Wolcott provided in his research. He's an anthropologist, and he uses the term of education. He defines education, and every discipline defines education differently. But I own this definition. You know, you learn things and it's like, that's it. But what do you think about this? Education is the transmission of culture. The transmission of culture. What might be your first question? What might be your first question to hearing that definition? Anybody can answer. Click off if you can, and just tell me what your thoughts are.
I guess the first question I would ask is, what culture is being transmitted?
Absolutely. What culture? What culture? So when you think about the disciplines that you teach and the perspectives in which you teach your discipline, are you framing your content in with a understanding that my discussion in class and the topics that I teach, how inclusive do I make them? And if I'm not certain on what to do, how do I find out? Whose role is it? Whose responsibility is it? When you come into the classroom with concepts, now you're looking at a definition that has multiple disciplines' contribution to their way of defining culture. I heard many of you talk of culture. I want you to understand, well, and I heard some of these terminologies, which is important. The learned behaviors, customs, languages, and way of life of an individual or people. And you can read it for yourself, but Mark brought up the model, which is used by anthropologists to describe culture as being like an iceberg. And on that iceberg, there's a line drawn where 10% is what people know about us when it comes to them understanding our culture. Oftentimes, some definitions of culture is used synonymously with race, and it is not. I loved what someone said about the term race being a social construct. And it was used by sociologists as a term during the 50s to begin to help understand different groups and organize and structure a society. So as a result, people became pigeonholed in one or two areas of what race are you? So all of these terminologies, when we talk about culture, is a way to help us understand things that we haven't had to understand, help us see differently in ways we haven't had to see differently. So when we talk about that iceberg, if you draw iceberg on your paper and draw that line of 10% being the tip, and then the bottom part, which is called, the top of the iceberg, it's called surface. That's what you see. People only can define you and your culture by 10% of what they see, very much like communication. The other part, that's called, the top is surface, the bottom is deep culture. Those are the things that I think Mark and Marcus, I forgot your wife's name, but both of you talked about the fact that you don't know why the woman put you in that program. She had microaggressions. But deep-seatedly, there's something about her educational framework that says you should not be in honors programs. That's deep. The same way, and I was in on that that discussion where someone cut into a car and the person that said something said, why would she? Gender is another aspect of culture. So culture is very, very, and that's why I defined it as humanity. Now, keep in mind, when you don't see and understand what's deep within the cultural context of a human, it's like the Titanic. It's like the Titanic. That's the outcome of what happens. We're having a societal Titanic right now. I'm not going to get into that. However, you can read those definitions. Some of you in your group said shared attitudes, values, belief. We don't really, values is deep. Values is deep. We in Christian higher ed say we're Christian communities and this is how we live and these are our values and these are, and yet we have kids that don't really understand the depth of the values we have. And we don't take the time when they violate that to really understand why there's tension with those values. So culture, I just took this particular aspect, this particular term, because this is important to your own awareness of yourself. Where am I with all of this? Your role as a teacher is critical to come to terms with how you view yourself and others. So let's look at this particular next statement here. Personal cultural sensitivity. The ability to respond effectively and appropriately to different cultural contexts in an environmental setting. And in this case, it's the classroom. It's the campus. How am I able to respond appropriately? It also means showing empathy, which is the ability to participate in another person's experience, including emotional and intellectual. You have a document in your packet. It's called Personal Assessment Evaluation. We're not going to break out into groups, but I want you to pull that document up. I want you to pull that document up. The response is yes or no. And right in the front, because I do use this document in many environments in which I present, I had on there your principal, but I'm talking about your administration. Let's look at the first one. Can you identify the human problems that block or hinder open and honest communication between yourself and administration, your colleagues, and your students? What do you know about yourself, and how would you answer that? Yes or no? So when we talk about cultural sensitivity and personal awareness, how much are you aware about the way your students, how you view your students in your classroom? What do you know about that? What do you think about that? How can you make, I can't see all my screen here, so I'm gonna make some adjustments here to make sure I'm reading this right, because I want you to, yeah, that's better. Take the personal assessment evaluation. You may not be able to, you may just be able to read it. I want you to look at maybe the first 5. Read the first 5 there. I want you to write your responses, yes or no. It says here, set 3 goals. We don't have enough time, but I want you to be able to tell a few folks, say, hey, this is something I'd like to set my goals about. Set my goals for this year. It may not be within the first 5. Just choose one. As you look at, wow, how much do I know about my students and myself and their views, and what might be one area when it comes to being sensitive and having empathy? How can you make your students aware of who you are? And what are ways you can learn about your students? So take a look at those items. There's about 30, is it 31? Yeah. Choose any one. Just look at one that you think that, you know what, this is a no. And I know it. I'm not going to lie about it. It's just true. I want to make this a goal because this is something I can work on myself with. So I can come back real quick to you. If you just find one, you could check off whys to as many as you can, but there should be an area where you see, or I want you to be able to see, this is an area as my role as a teacher, having diverse students, diverse classroom, diverse colleagues, all the ways that I can personally look at myself. Okay, come, let's somebody share out, somebody to share out. Anyone. I know we're moving fast and I have a lot, but when you think about knowing yourself, when you think about knowing your students, when you think about your curriculum, as well as your environment.
I got one.
Yes, who's that? Who's
this is Deb Baker speaking.
Hi, Deb. Okay.
Hi. Number 9.
Okay.
It says, do you use technology or supplemental materials as films, videos, or other creative resources that is inclusive of diverse groups? And as this last couple weeks setting up my new Moodle courses for this fall, I like to put in little pictures, like to put in little kind of graphic, you know, kind of fun little things. So I've been really, really intentional about either not putting in a person of, you know, faith or their face, you know, so, or making sure I have all kinds of ethnicities represented. I'm also kind of using more words rather than photos or pictures, just so there's that area of inclusivity or not leaving a people group out. So I'm trying to be intentional about that this fall.
Key word. Thank you, Deb. Intentionality. In order for us to really engage the students in our learning community, is we have to be intentional. We have to be intentional. And for us as believers, we have to do that with conviction. We have to do that with conviction because God has entrusted us with students, some who've never gone to an institution of higher ed within their own background, their first generation. How intentional are you ensuring that what I produce communicates in a way that says to them, oh, you're speaking and addressing me. I get this. I want to share we often think, well, they're quiet. They don't, that's their code, that they don't talk. They don't. You as a teacher have the tools, or you are the key, not to just pouring into your students, but drawing out. Somebody else, anybody that sees something that you think, I've got to make this a goal. I appreciate that, Deb, that word intentionality and using that as a goal for what you're going to do, because I tell you, there's a lot of information out there, a plethora of information. Somebody else. Quick, come on. This is not a judge.
I do have a question. Number 28, when you talk about stakeholders, who are you talking about?
Anybody that invests in your school, alumni, community members. You guys I read the different things that are sent out. Some of your Chamber of Commerce, parents, anyone that has a stake in your institution, middle school, high school graduates, anyone that has stake outside, you definitely include your students, the administration, your faculty, your staff, your dorm folks. Stakeholders are those who have a stake in the work that you do in education.
Okay, thank you.
your funders, your donors.
I think, Doretha,
Uh-huh.
one of the things that I did a little bit of,
Yes.
but this semester I want to do more of. I've got colleagues, diverse colleagues from my both my graduate programs
Uh-huh.
that I want to reach out to get their feedback on diverse reading material, articles.
Yes.
I did a little bit of that, but not enough. So I want to incorporate that because they have a wealth of information
Yes.
that I'm limited in. So I want to do that more.
Gail, I appreciate what you just said and the way you said it. I made some efforts there. I recognize my limitations. And it's important that everyone recognizes you don't have it all.
Right.
There's a community around us. So it is so important. Think about who can, especially in by this means of education, through Zoom, where people don't really have to drive out to a space but they can contribute by clicking on the link and starting to share. Excellent. Anyone else? And we'll go on, keep moving.
Hey, Doretha.
Yes.
I think for me, one of the things that I've just recently tried to start doing is sharing a little bit more of my own story. Because my father's from Mexico, but I don't fit the stereotype of an Hispanic or a Mexican. And I've had a lot of personal experiences around that. And I realized that I've not shared that with my students. And I think it would help me connect, because I've learned that quite a few students are trying to ride two different cultures, the culture that they're from and the culture that they come into when they come into class. And I think that sharing that more would be helpful for them. So just being a little bit more intentional about sharing my own stories about those things, and the fact that I was a first generation student and all those kind of things.
Outstanding. And let me give you a little tool, something that I use. I got a whole bag of tools that I use in that. It's called, and everybody, you can take advantage of it. It's called your cultural bag. And what you do, you bring in, and what I did, I brought in a particular backpack. And so I introduced myself, not just by my name, but this is who I am. And I showed a picture of Texas and me being in Texas as a little girl, and then migrating here to California. And I had a little schoolhouse and some other stuff out of my granddaughter's little dollhouse stuff. Then I go on to talk about me growing up as a teenager, and I pull out a cigarette lighter and click it on, and the fire comes up, and I say, hey, I was right in the middle of the Watts riots coming up. And here are some of the things that made it, that I grew up going through. Then I had some other artifacts. That's what I call them, the artifacts. I had a picture of a mola, which is this artwork that's done by the San Blas Indians when I was missionary in Panama. And so they saw the mola of Mike's that connected me with Panama. And then I come back and I have a red apple, because my first role as a teacher, first position as a teacher I had, that was an apple. I show a picture of my husband, 46, well now 46 years, not then before, but they get a sense of who I am. And then I open it up for questions. Then the next class, they do it. I get to know them by their cultural bag. So it's not just your name, where you from, and all, but I get to know a bit about their story. See, the one thing about us as believers, we find ourselves living on this side of the cross. Well, why do they get to know that? Why do they have to know that? Why do they have to know that? Because they do understand that there is more to you than what they see above the surface. There are experiences in your life that causes you to be you. And the same way with them. I tell you, the trust breakdown that goes on is amazing. So that's a little tool you could have. Then there's the cultural map where you show your journey. You use a map and you show your journey. And there are other ways that you might be willing to do that. But Eric, that's excellent. Okay, I'm going to move on quickly. Personal sensitivity. We move on to the next one, which is cultural competence. See, cultural competence has to do with me mastering the components required in being more sensitive and being more empathetic. So it involves knowing when you need to shift cultural perspectives and adapt behavior. You have in your packet an item called cultural considerations of how students learn. So how much knowledge do you have about dealing with students and their personal backgrounds, their personal skills? What do you know about the way that they learn? And let me just say this first and foremost, nothing I'm giving you is for you to stereotype and say, oh, okay, this is, okay, Leroy Baruth and Manning, they did a lot of study on different behavior patterns and types of groups that's in our society. So I'm providing you with the tool, not to use to stereotype or typeset, but to stimulate you to think of your need to further study on your own. So take out that little, it's the cultural consideration of groups. And so there's the African American, and then it's the school practices that impede their progress. It's about your diverse students. The suggestion for understanding, teaching African Americans. Then I have one on the Asian Americans, and I should have moved this outside of Hispanic to Latin, because you know that Hispanics don't umbrella all folks of Spanish culture. We have the whole Central and South America, and as well as Mexico and all of the geographics, but some dynamics are common. There's more work that's been done on folks coming from African continents, Asian continents, the Middle Eastern continents. So you have to do, as a role of the teacher, you're not just there to just get all my information across. Remember, it's who you are. You're showing and determining, if I'm going to be culturally competent, I want to know. Don't be afraid to ask your students questions to help you understand. And you know what? I know that there is a fear that comes on us when would this be culturally insensitive? Would you be, hey, you know what? There are a couple of words that you could say to help you in this process when you ask questions. I want to understand, and this is something I'm not certain of. Or if you think the way you're gonna, I don't want to be offensive. I want to be a learner. And that means I need to spend some time with you. If you teach in the United States, your students are going to be from a diverse background. So what ways can you learn about the personal backgrounds of diverse students? So who's courageous enough to tell me of the groups that I've given you? I've given you just a little bit about the Native American. Towards the last part, I didn't give you all the details of that. I've just given you a few. Someone tell me maybe a group that's listed here that you find yourself, I'm kind of I'm concerned about my own thoughts and appreciating the learning style of a given group. That's calling you out. I know you may feel that, you know, and I'll give you an example. I had to really learn about the Asian culture. So when I was a teacher at Biola, I taught a class called Intercultural and Interpersonal Adjustments. And a student applied to be my TA. And her name was, well, Julia, we'll leave it like that, but she was Asian and Peruvian. She was a Peruvian Asian. And as you can see, I have a little animation. As you can see, my voice goes from 0 to 100. That's me. That's who I am. Well, she went to the department chair and said to her, I think Dr. O'Quinn is very angry. I don't know. I hope I get TA with her, but I think she's very angry. Well, needless to say, my department chair knows me. She also knows how I approach teaching. And it was also during a time right after the 92 uprising. So there was a lot of tension between Asians and African Americans during that time. Some, I won't loop everybody, but for the most part, especially in LA. So my chair called me to tell me how she was what she was feeling. And so I could have easily decided, you know what? Now she was my TA, not necessarily my student, but she probably represented possibly, because I had Asian students in the class, and I'm not categorizing them. So hear me out when I say this. I'm thinking she could also be addressing what might be the thoughts of others. So she and I called her, we went to lunch. She was so nervous. And I just told her, this is who I am. This is my style of teaching. I'm so passionate about this particular topic. I'm not an angry Black woman. So wherever that's come from, if I've demonstrated it to you, I'm sorry. That is not my intention, right? So she asked me questions, we worked through it. So I had a class that as a TA, I would give her a certain topic. My Asian TA, who I loved, now let me tell you guys something. On this particular topic, I want you guys to really get, because she was passionate about a certain thing. And I'm like, oh, Julia, were you angry? She said, no, Dr. O'Quinn, I want them to get it. And I was looking at their faces and they were like, I'm not good enough to tell them that they need you. I wanted them to know. So there are times that we have to take time to help our students understand ourselves and differences. Gail mentioned, or someone mentioned that Gail said that people, you know, there's subcultures from the South, different subcultures, and it's true. But there are times that history from one lens to another lens, from the South to the North way of doing things, come into tension. And it's the role of the teacher that will bring those tensions into conversation. That's what we need. We need that today in our nation. So anybody, I gave you my little Asian illustration here. Anyone else? And I also realized I needed to read about the way Asians experience education, because Julia was my TA, but I had students who I love and I engage in. I had Korean colleagues that we talked and we dialogued about certain things. So I was very conscious of that. Anyone else? Thanks, Eric, for your comment on the other. Somebody else. I know it's a hard thing to to deal with, and I'm moving pretty fast, not leaving you with a whole lot of
Well,
processing time.
I know I'm Asian, but I struggled with the Asians.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
went
true.
abroad and I taught in Korea for about 10 years. And this academy was grooming Asian students to go to Ivy League schools in America. So I was tasked with undoing their cultural behaviors in regards to learning. And and it was really difficult. You know, there was a part in there that said, even if they know the answer, they're not going to speak up about it.
Yeah.
And if they were to behave that way at Harvard or Stanford, wherever they were going, they would have just been bowled over. And for me, because I know the kind of student that I am, I'm exactly that way. To have to undo that was really, really difficult. And but it was interesting because I didn't have to. The way that they were trying to teach them in Asia was to not accommodate to being Asian, but it was forcing them to become more American because that's the better thing to do. And I think that's what we do unconsciously in America, right? It's always like, speak up, speak up, speak up.
Yes.
Where in America, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah.
In Japan, the nail that sticks
Hammered
up
it.
smashed
Exactly.
down.
That's right.
So the idea to that you can accommodate and try to help them out, but also I think what you were saying was really important, because not only do they need to understand that you care about their learning style, but that you have your own style too.
Exactly.
And you're not trying to impose, you know, upon them, but this is your style. So if you can understand each other, then we can make some ground together.
Absolutely. And that comes with humility. You as an educator have a key tool that's your resource, and it's humility. And if you're not willing to acknowledge that, rest assured, your students will remember you far after you're out of their classrooms, and it won't be for the reason that you want them to. You ever hear a student say, "Oh, don't take that, professor"? Wonder why. Wonder why. So going on to the next slide, as I want you, Marcus, here's more work for you. I'm just saying, Marcus, I'm just saying, okay? All right. So Dr. Doretha already said he's going to invite you in there. So get the handouts. You got a lot to learn within coming to a new culture. So learn that, but take advantage of the tools that I'm going to leave for you and with you. All right. So the culturally proficient, competent instructor. How do you put into practice your sensitivity and personal skills with your students? What's your professional practice like? These are the questions you must ask yourself. Now, in your handout, I have some tools, additional tools that I am leaving for you. We won't discuss them. I'll give you the headers real quick. This one isn't a header, but Association of American Colleges and Universities have a website called LEAP, which really deals with learning outcomes. They have the learning outcomes and a rubric that you can use, and you can go on their website and look for on interpersonal competence. And it uses Bloom's taxonomy of measuring content that you will develop within your curriculum for competence. So go on and check it out. That isn't in your handout. You can go to the website. I have a handout called Racism in the Classroom. What does that look like? These are tools. Racially sensitive classroom. How? Racial sensitivity in the classroom. And then reducing prejudice. All of that's in the classroom. All of it's in the classroom. It occurs. And whether intentional, I'm not saying. However, as we look at ourselves, we have to think about what we contribute. But I do have another packet of information that I want you to go to if you can. It's called the Best Practices for Culturally Proficient, Competent Instruction. And this was one I wanted you guys to do a breakout, but I really do want you to talk and engage you in this particular one. So I'm going to I am going to do it again. 10 minutes. You're going to pull out best practices for culturally proficient, competent instruction. There's nothing you've got to bring back. I want you to discuss it. So I want you to, in your group, look at any of these list of items around what are best practices. And then amongst yourselves, talk about something you see that's on the list that you might need help with or you want further discussion. So, Abby, can you send folks to groups really quickly? We'll take 10 minutes. Us are coming back. A couple of things that I wanted to, well, let's see, we have quite a few people still. Let's hope they're having good discussion. Okay, well, I'm just, for the sake of ending, going to, wait a minute, I think, wait. Okay, I'm gonna take back the screen here. Okay. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted as an outcome for you all to do in this process is to really start with a conversation. In one of the groups, a couple of the folks, or I won't say a couple, there was a reference to, these are some things that are absolute that I might not be able to make adjustments to. And oftentimes when we talk about culturally proficient instruction, if we have to make adjustments that makes it possible for a student and their learning style to comprehend the content, that is not dumbing down. And that is a fallacy that often is communicated when it comes to the understanding of adapting curriculum. Well, that means I got to dumb it down. It can't be too tight or it can't be too difficult. No, you keep your expectations high, but you modify and find out how might that student understand using a different approach. So I really wanted to hit that, is that asking you to be competent, culturally proficient, and looking at best practices about doing that is not about dumbing down your curriculum. As a matter of fact, it's raising it up because it is inclusive. I heard someone else mention a good discussion in the group that talked about, sometimes you might have to use photos, you might have to use pictures or whatever it takes, or you might give them the actual theme of what it is you're expecting and allow them to engage in the learning experience. So that is so important in this process. And so I'm going to come to a close with these last 7 key principles, and you all keep having your discussions. I want to be able to, I'm just going to go over these 7 principles. Students are affirmed in their cultural connections, their interest of what you're teaching as it involves them. Some of you who are theologians who might find it difficult to find content around your topic that is inclusive of any given group, I would encourage you, look for historically Black college seminaries. Look at materials they might use. Ask pastors of color in other seminaries what they might use to connect with their students' interests, or who's writing about the topic. So taking your own initiative, it's work. And that's why a lot of people are leaving education. And honestly, I would prefer that than to destroy the desire of learning in our students. Teachers are personally inviting. You are the first book they read. The classroom is physically inviting. And I know you don't have the access necessarily, well, not right now, you certainly don't, but in your office, behind me, you see flags from all different countries. You see a nestle doll, you see a picture of an elephant that my granddaughter with Down syndrome did when she was 2 years old. And I cut it up in pieces, and I took her information, her little art, made it a puzzle. And then it says, I gotta remember, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so I look, and you see other places up there, those are countries I've gone to. Now, did I do that intentionally for you? No, that's important to me. My students, it's important for my students to really understand that I've gone beyond the borders and waters of America because our world is great. Students are reinforced for academic development. Another reason I told you about that, because I have students who I had from Uganda, from Kenya, from Nigeria, and I've got all those flags up there. Besides that, I've gone to Israel, I've gone to Panama, I've gone to Guatemala. And so I have different things that, different things that show them, and usually this would be in my office. They would be welcoming. I had a bust of Dr. Martin Luther King. So, and then I have some other information that is inclusive. And you might say, well, what about the Anglo students? Well, at the end of the day, I have some beautiful things there. I've got a picture of a student who actually drew this picture for me after I did a chapel at Life. And it was a picture of a white face, a white girl, and a brown girl, and a dove in the middle of it that I keep, so that whoever comes in my office know that somewhere in my life, they are. Students are reinforced for academic development. Changes made to accommodate culture are essential to learning and the learning of the knowledge, their learning styles. The classroom is managed with firm, consistent, loving control. Oftentimes we got how many minutes? How many minutes did I have? And I'm constantly rushing you and pressing you. This isn't an easy topic to cover in one setting. And I'm so glad Marcus is with you. And whether you refer to this with him, any of this information with him or not, allow yourself to engage with him in ways that he will be able to draw out of each of you a place of beginning to build a culturally responsive learning community. And then interaction, stress, collectivity, as well as individuality. As Americans, we look in our world from individual lens. We have many students from different cultural backgrounds that are collective groups. And oftentimes, and at one point, I used to tell my teachers, especially if K-12, that they would always say, well, the Spanish kids or the Latino kids or Hispanic kids, they want to cheat. They want to work together and then come up with the answer. No, that's forming community. They learn in a collective environment. What is our ultimate goal? Is that they get the learning outcome. So you don't be afraid and hesitant, I know you do, to use small groups. And then finally, my closing thought to you is everybody wants to change the world and see the world differently. Don't we all? But one of the most important things is that you know yourself. And everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one really thinks about the urgency of changing him or herself. The late Congressman John Lewis, who I admired in many ways, he left something that I will personally, as far as 2 words, own. And that's called good trouble. Good trouble. Changing ourselves as educators, and in our role, let that be good trouble. Changing ourselves as educators to become culturally proficient, to engage and invite all the students that have come to our institution. Changing ourselves is good trouble. Go get in good trouble. So with that, Dr. Doretha.
Thank you very much, Dr. O'Quinn. It was a blessing to have you here. You've given us so much homework. We have so much to do, and I really appreciate how prepared you came for this, all the materials that you've sent, and we surely have a lot of homework to do. And I know Marcus will be very engaged with all the material that you've provided. And for the future of LPU. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've run out of time. It was, I also want to thank you because you made it so interactive. You made it so applying the active learning theory, and faculty was engaged. You used the breakout groups, and so time went by, and we already 1 minute till noon. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna shift gears, and we have some Q&A. So what I wanna do is we're gonna move that section to a written form, and we'll send those questions to Dr. O'Quinn. And when we send that email out with the recording and with information about this workshop, we'll send a written response from Dr. O'Quinn to you guys. So, and hopefully everyone will be able to see, and that will help us with the time right now. The other thing I want to remind you is that we are halfway through August. Next week, we have our faculty brunch. It's going virtual this time. We're doing a little bit of a shorter version, but we do want you to be part of it, and it's open to adjunct faculty too. And we are sending, we have the team, and Lori and Denise and Maria and Abby, they've been working hard. We are sending some little cards. They'll get to your house soon, and the idea is that you'll be able to buy lunch and be part of the brunch and enjoy a meal together with your committees. Then the following week we have the faculty work days. We're going to shorten those to only 2 days. That's only for full-time and part-time faculty, and we also shortening the time. But those will be here on campus with social distancing and face masks. And unless you are sick, you can stay home, but we are expecting for those 2 days, we have more workshops. One of the workshops that Dr. Remy will be presenting is the one about the summer reading book. This time we're gonna do it as an actual workshop presentation from Dr. Remy. And if you haven't, I wanna encourage you to read chapter 6 fostering student persistence and success. And I tell you, now more than ever, we need to make sure we are understanding also motivational learning theory. We are understanding about and mindful about retention and student success and helping our students persist in the midst of COVID-19 and everything that's going on. But so what I want to do right now is have Marcus close us in prayer. And also I want to give President Angie, if she wants to say a few words before we turn it over to Marcus.
I just want to thank you all for again joining today. And Doretha, you are on fire. We could have sat here for the rest of the afternoon. You had so much content. So we value you. You are a great treasure to us, to the Foursquare Church and beyond. Thank you. All of our love and respect. And thank you, Dr. Duarte.
And may I just say, I apologize for going in. I thought I was to go to 12 and then we have the questions. I'm so sorry. I did say 10, I did see 10 to 12 on our schedule, but I thought, okay. So please send your questions. I will answer them. I may just do a video and send it out to Denise, but you know my email. I'm in the life system. If you want to connect further, you have further questions, don't let this be the one stop. I want to respect Marcus, so start with him. And yet I want to be able to support you in any way I can.
Thank you. Thank you, Doretha. Marcus?
All right. Well, let us pray. Gracious Father in heaven, we thank you for this opportunity to come here and to learn with each other. I believe that's our desire to love you with all of our hearts, all of our minds, all of our soul, and all of our strength. And we ask you, Lord, to help us to do that more effectively. When it comes to diversity and inclusion, it's about loving our neighbor. And we pray, Lord, that by the power of the Holy Spirit, you would help us to engage our neighbors in a more loving way, with more compassion, with more empathy. So we just surrender this time to you, our lives to you, and our careers to you. And we pray, Lord, that you would have your way. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, academic team. There's going to be a survey going out to your emails. Please fill that up. Blessings.
Fill your evaluations out too. Send those to Denise. Sorry.